Hiya, folks. This is Rick Emmett of Triumph.
This is Mark Merrill, also known as Johnny B. Bad.
Yo, guys, it's Mark McKay.
Hey, this is Frank Fletcher.
Hola, amigos. This is Billy Sheehan.
Hey, guys, this is John Karabi.
Hey, guys, it's Leva Leone.
What's up, guys? Cassandra Carson here from Paralandra and the Life Project.
What's up, everybody? It's Logan from All the Pretty Things.
Hey, this is Cody Howell.
Hey, this is Sammy Lee, drummer of the band Red Rain.
My name's Reggie, and you are listening to the Weekly Pour podcast. Thanks so much for joining the most amazing twosome out there.
The most amazing things that can happen to a human being will happen to you if you lower your expectations. Welcome to the Weekly Pour podcast. Here are your hosts, TbT and Ace.
Greetings and welcome to the Weekly Pour podcast. I, of course, am TBT. The guy way over there is Ace. And joining us this week, our guest is a best-selling author, stand-up comedian, creative genius, award-winning radio personality, former CNN producer, Canadian, narcoleptic, avoider of proper jobs, and the creator of the TBT moniker. Please welcome Mr. Dick Wybrow. Welcome, Dick.
Hey, man.
Hey,
welcome welcome from the future, because I'm actually in, I was all over the United States with the radio thing, but now I live in New Zealand. So I am speaking to you from the future. It's summer. Wow.
What happens tonight?
We're not allowed to tell you. They make everybody, when you get your citizenship paperwork, because I am actually officially Kiwi, you get citizenship paperwork, you are sworn to secrecy. I'm not allowed to tell you, but I can tell you to avoid Steve. That's really all I can say is don't just give Steve a clear path.
Steve. Hold on, I got to write that down.
That's not really a warning about the future. That's just a general rule.
Oh, okay.
I haven't had very good luck with guys named Steve. So.
Sure. Are you considered a Kiwi?
My wife loves to call me a Kaniwi because, as you said, I am a Canadian. And so a Canadian Kiwi. But there's a certain flavor to Kiwi males, and I'm not it. I'm not it at all. Kiwi white boys. I'm very different. I mean, there are definitely times I come into a room full of Kiwi white boys, and they look at me like, is he speaking English? Which, who knows? I grew up in America. I may not be speaking proper English. Because when I came down from Canada, way back in the day, when I came down from Canada, it was bashed into me by the Americans. Because I came down because I just pronounced my words.
Right.
There's an American sort of coolness to speaking. So I remember at one point being like in the 6th grade or something, and I said, the overhead announcement in school, and I said, "Oh, what did that person say on the intercom?" "Oh, intercom." I got hell for that. It's like, how do you say it? It's like intercom. It's like, oh, I see. So you got to speak like a drunk Australian. I can do that. Fine. I grew up with a Kiwi dad. I can do that. So great.
Yeah. You just don't pronounce all the little syllables.
Yeah. You just kind of mumble your way through it. It's great.
Where at in Canada?
I grew up in Winnipeg, and like I like to tease my fellow Winnipeggers, it's a nice place to be from. when you leave, it's quite good. But I have been back on occasion. It's fun. It's a beautiful place. It's one of the coldest places on the planet. In fact, there was a time, you can Google it, it was like 10 years ago or so. There was a headline in the Winnipeg Free Press, which probably doesn't exist anymore in this day and age. But there was a headline in the Winnipeg Free Press that said, "The temperature yesterday in Winnipeg was colder than the surface of the moon." Give you an idea. That's a special kind of cold, man. That is a special kind of cold there.
That's where Chris Jericho left from, because he was born there.
We had a bunch. They're like Monty Hall.
Yeah.
My mother, she's a diehard sort of Canadian. The sort like anytime the Olympics are on, did you see the Canadians how they were doing? Like, no, I haven't been paying attention. They're doing really, really well in curling. It's like they're the only ones who do that. Nobody else does curling.
I was just in Ontario. In Cornwall. My wife has family in Cornwall, Ontario, and we were visiting some family, and we would come home late at night. It's like 10, 11 o'clock at night, and her aunt is still up watching curling, and it's every night. It was every night. And I don't know if it's some sort of national event or it's curling season or what, but it was on every night.
I think it's whatever y'all are good at. I mean, we've got curling. I mean, we had hockey, but the Americans got really good, and then a bunch of those folks in the Eastern Bloc countries, that makes me sound old, they got really damn good. So we still, Canadians, we still got curling. We got curling and poutine. We own those two things. And so
I love it.
That's us. That's what we own. It's the same thing here in New Zealand. When the Olympics come by, they're really big into shot put. It's like shot put. That's what, 3,000 years old? But no, they're really into it because they have a number of athletes that kill at it. So they love their shot put.
And there's probably a lot of that going on now because it's summer there, right?
It's just, yeah. So today, right now, we're coming up on the equinox, or it's within 24 hours of right now the equinox. So you're about to hop into spring, and we're going to go into autumn. They don't call it fall here, and if you say fall, they do give you a bit of a So we're about to head into autumn. And it's funny, you know, what they do here, because when I first came here, I was a bit cocky about it, because they'd say, oh, tomorrow's going to be, you know, this is the first day of summer. It was December 1st. It was like, no, the seasons change on the equinox or the autumnal. You know, it's got to be like on the 21st or the 20th. No. I think it's called the meteorological, as they say, because where we sort of are situated, sort of like on the sort of a bit of a dingleberry on the bottom of the entire world. The seasons don't quite follow everybody else, and they're right, man. Because so we take a look, like our autumn really starts March 1st instead of, let's say, the 21st or whatever it might be. Because, and it's funny that you take a look and go like, oh, it's still so hot, I can't believe it, at almost to the day. So like, wow, that really, what happened? It's right around the first of the month where suddenly it goes from cool to hot to cool. And so, yeah, so March 1st, December 1st, that's sort of when we flip things around.
Yeah, we're sitting, today's I think it's today. Today was the first day of spring, and it's a balmy 54 degrees here, and it's ridiculous.
Right. It's right now, it's 17 degrees. Because I'm in Celsius over here, and hey, if nothing else, because a lot of people say, you know, I love the Weekly Pour podcast, but I just don't learn enough about temperature conversion. A lot of people tell me that, and so here is your opportunity. I'll give you a quick little sort of temperature conversion. What you do is, if you want to sound real smart, and it's a thumbnail sketch, right? But so take that Celsius number and double it and add 30, and you're pretty damn close. So if it's, let's say it's 15 degrees, double it, 30, add 30, it's 60. That's pretty much it. Right now it's 17, what is that? 64? Did I get that right? I can't imagine.
Yeah.
That's where the problem
Math.
is. You're going to be able to double stuff in your head.
I'm writing this
64.
next to Steve's name so that I don't forget.
But no, it's not bad. It's not bad. Just double the Celsius number and add 30. And if nothing else, it won't necessarily give you an exact temperature. But I know if I double that and add 30, 64, I know that, I probably should put a light coat on, right? It kind of helps you with your wardrobe planning, if nothing else. Although here, like anywhere else, the moment you step into the sun, and more so in New Zealand than any place else, because I think we got a big hole in the ozone above us, which is seasonal, by the way. It's sort of like this opening and closing sort of thing. It kind of expands and contracts. But you hop into that Kiwi sun, and I tell you what, man, you feel it. The first time we were walking down Karangahape Road in Auckland,
bless you,
and I remember walking. I was right in the middle of K Road. Make it easy, right in the middle of K Road, and I actually could feel the back of my calves. And I turned to my wife and said, I actually can feel it burning. I think I can smell it. Because the Kiwi sun is wicked. It's really wicked. The moment you step into it, it changes the temperature entirely.
So how long did you say you've lived there now?
We've been here 10 years. We've been
10
here 10
years.
And, and who knows what might happen over the next couple of months. We might actually cross the ditch, as some folks say, and we might head over to Aussie.
Wow.
Give that a shot for a while. Yeah. Although they've got a lot of poisonous stuff. Everything's poisonous over there. Everything's dangerous. Spiders are dangerous. Snakes are dangerous. Aussies are dangerous. Everything's poisonous. Everything's dangerous. But, I Googled around a bit for like poisonous things, because we don't have any for the most part here in New Zealand. There's nothing. I have no concerns. If I'm going to reach into the log pile, there's nothing there that's going to hurt me. But in Aussie, it's like, you want to probably put on some steel gloves.
Yeah, and it's not the same as shrimp on the Barbie. I mean, that makes it sound exotic.
No, they don't even call them shrimp. They call them prawns, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah.
That really takes a lot away from it.
I think they really probably hate that shrimp on the Barbie stuff.
Oh.
Which means, of course, when I go over to visit here in a little while to meet with some folks, I'm probably going to be saying that a lot. There's nothing like putting people a little bit off center.
Exactly, getting that look.
That's why I call Canada Little America when I go up there.
What's funny is I don't think Canadians would be bothered by that. For one, Canadians for the most part just let stuff. Yeah, they just kind of roll off there. They're not really bothered by it. I used to say all the time, Canada's kind of like the 51st state between California and Colorado. I think that's about right. And because for the most part, that it kind of is. We're just really nicer and just don't care so much about stuff. And I don't mean don't care, but we just can't get riled up about stuff. It's fine. It's whatever. It's fine.
Well, and they know as much about American politics as I do. I mean, you go up there and that's what you talk about. And it's like, my gosh, are we still in America? Well, the United States,
Yeah. Because they'll kvetch about it to themselves. They'll kvetch about it, but just not to Americans necessarily. But yeah.
So,
it's funny. I was really welcome for the most part when I came, and I would say it was like Canadian for the most part, all over the United States. And I guess like I said, we're pretty much all the same, but I never felt any sort of disassociation or whatever it might be. And I feel pretty American myself, having grown up there. But like when I was on the Gulf Coast at TK 101, when I met you, TBT, it was just one of those things that, it was never like, here's a foreigner, here's somebody from somewhere else. It was he's one of us. I always felt really welcome, especially in the South. Which I know the South gets a lot of hell for that sort of thing, but man, I never felt so welcome as being in the South. And there's something, because the first station I worked at was in El Dorado Springs, Missouri, KESM, this tiny little 1,500-watt country radio station. And I was the morning guy. And so, of course, being a morning guy in a country radio station with red hair, they called me Rooster. So I went by Rooster. I mean, I was called Dick later, so it all kind of lines up. But so I went by Rooster, and people were the greatest, man. People were so sweet. They were really accommodating, really kind. Within the first week of being there, somebody came by the radio station and brought me biscuits and gravy. Keeping in mind that I'm from Canada, I love me some gravy, and sort of grew up in the Midwest, that sort of area. And somebody brought me biscuits and gravy, and I was like, thank you. And then I'm looking like, it's just starch and starch. It's just starch on starch. I didn't even quite get all that coming together in the same place. But after a while, you throw a little bit of sausage in there, it's fantastic. It's one of the greatest things on the planet, and amazing for a hangover.
What led you to New Zealand, though? You're born in Canada, moved to Jersey.
Yeah.
It eventually ended up in New Zealand.
So, yeah, born in Canada, went to Jersey, grew up for the most part in the Midwest and Minnesota, and then radio took me all over. I moved to Florida, 2 different places in Florida, 2 different places in California. I lived in Texas for a while. I was in Missouri in a couple different places. So, yeah, bounced all over. My last gig was at 96 Rock in Atlanta, major market there. So, yeah, I moved all around. But there was at one point, I ended up getting out of radio, and I got into television. I ended up producing television at CNN for about 10 years. And my wife and I were looking about moving. Let's get out of the city. Let's find something else. And so we're kind of looking at places in Colorado. But the sort of the dream in a way was always one day we'll retire in New Zealand. And I was Googling around one day, probably with a whiskey in my hand, Googling around, and I happened to find out that because my father is Kiwi, because I've got a bunch of Kiwi relatives, that I'm what's called citizen by descent, which meant that I was Kiwi. I just had to file the paperwork and, give them some blood. Not having good blood. But once I found out that, she just turned around and she said, then what are we doing here? And that was October. We were in country, moved, everything, by January of that next year. So yeah, within like 3 months. Yeah, that was nuts. That was insane. And I did television here up until this past December.
Oh, you were still working for CNN up until that point?
No, I ended up, I came into country, and it was funny because it's kind of insular in a way. It's like anything. This is a country of 5 million people. And so when I came here, I was like, I should be able to find a job. I've been doing television. The resume looks good, whatever it might be. And I sent out a bunch of resumes all over the place, and I got nothing, man. Not even rejections, just radio silence. And I was getting freaked out, because I was burning through that 401k I wasn't supposed to spend.
Right.
Right.
And probably have a lot of fines for. But so I was burning out through our money. And so I was at the time we were living with my cousin. I have a cousin in country who's great, Lucy, and her husband, Josh. And a friend of hers was over, and I came downstairs, whatever, and, another day of sending out resumes with nothing, just echo. I was like, does your internet work? Are these going out? And so I said, well, tell me, take a look at it. This was a business person. And I showed him my resume, 3 pages, your standard resume. He goes, oh, that's a bit showy. It's like, what? I said, well, you got CNN on there. It's like, oh, that's where I worked for 10 years. Wow. Bit of a brag. It's like, no, that was just a workplace. And I was like, what do you, he said, I'd get rid of those awards. It's like, the Peabodys, those were hard earned. Nah, it's a bit of a show off. It's like, okay. So his advice, take it from 3 pages down to 1 page. I swear to you, I turned CNN to Turner Broadcasting, as I was at the time, and I started getting responses from people. And that's part of what it was. There's a thing here called tall poppy, and if you sort of big up yourself in any way, including a resume apparently, people kind of go, oh, that guy? Oh, I don't know. He really thinks a lot of himself. And I'm used to lying on resumes. I'm used to overinflating what I'd done.
Right.
And so, yeah. So, but after that, I ended up working for a place called News Hub, which, by the way, is nuts. Not to get onto a tangent, but there's 2 major television networks in town. Basically, you got TVNZ and TV3, and then you've got News Hub. So there's 2 competing 6 p.m., and 6 p.m. is the big flagship show on both networks, 6 p.m. broadcast newscasts. And so I worked on the 6 p.m. newscast on TV3, and then now, as of June, that entire newscast is going away, which may not sound huge to y'all, but we're literally losing half of our news. There will be 1 news broadcast in this country, and there's some rumor that it might go down to half an hour. That's what's happening to television news right now. It's really bizarre, and it's happening all over the world. It's happening everywhere. Just all the fragmentation.
Why would that happen there if you've got just the 2 programs, and that's what everyone's relying on?
I think in part just because of the population size, in part, just because there's so fewer people than a lot of other places to be able to sort. Because free-to-air television is supported by advertising, and so advertisers are spending less money. They don't want to, in post-pandemic, they realize that maybe online might get them sort of more value. I don't know. And then so you have fewer people watching television. I mean, I used to really pay attention. The same thing you should do on radio, TBT. I would take a look at those ratings, and I would take a look at the quarter hours. And for all the stuff that happens on the radio, and, because we ended up delivering a TK, we got the best numbers in the history of the radio station. And it's not a brag. It's one of those that when you sort of see the patterns and pieces and you pick it all apart, it's not just about going on the air and going like, oh, look, we just, we pushed Mike down a hill. It's not just about that. And
some of it was.
It's also about, well, it was, but maybe it's too inside baseball. But you might be interested a little bit this by Ace, because you're a writer, and so all those bits and pieces and all those little patterns. It's something as simple as get into your commercial break before the other guys do. And we were competing against WABB. So if I got my commercial break before then, and I don't go into all the science of it, but if I got into my commercial break before then by a minute or 2, I would end up winning that half hour, that quarter hour. And so it was all those little intricacies, right? All those little bits and pieces. And so for all the stuff you hear or see on television, it looks like just people talking on the radio. There's so much science that goes behind all of it, the length of talk sets and some of the topics and all that. And it's not like it's orchestrated in a way where it's not organic, because it's all organic, the stuff, for the most part, happens on the air. But there is a lot of thought in the background. There's a lot of consideration about how things play out. Anyway, so I was paying really close attention to the ratings here in New Zealand, and as part of how I helped deliver some of the best ratings on the network. But from year 1 of our show, we're on the air for about 7 years. From year 1, I remember going to my EP, the executive producer, saying, have you noticed that the putts, people using television putts, I said, they're going down. And he goes, yeah, that's the thing. I said, but like 15%, which might not seem like a lot, but compound that over 5 years, that's terrifying. And so the ratings that we would get that we didn't feel great about, let's say in year one, we might have had, let's say, 100,000 people watching. The ratings weren't very good. The shares weren't very good. But then by year 7, we had great ratings, shares, meaning the number of people who were watching TV or watching you, but the number of people had dropped to around 65, 70,000. And in a country of 5 million people, if you have great ratings, meaning all the people watching TV are watching, this percentage are watching you, if you have great ratings and you're getting 70,000 people watching you, you're in a lot of trouble. And so they ended up canceling our show when our ratings were at all-time high because people are just not watching television like they used to.
Right. So the overall rating was down because less people were watching, but your show was doing really well.
It was doing well because there's two factors. One is a rating, and so the rating is a broad sort of like how many people out of 5 million are watching your show. And then there's something called a share. And this sounds all technical, but it might be interesting for you. A share means if everybody watching TV right now, what percentage are watching you? So our share was great. We had a great share. We had like a 20. 1 out of 5 people at 7 p.m. were watching us. That was great. But the rating as a whole was down because people were not watching television anymore.
Right. And I get into this with American TV with ratings because networks suffer because now we have first we had cable. Now we have streaming. And when we all grew up, you could draw a 30 share and you're the number one show on TV. You've got a 30. Oh my God.
You'd never see a 30 share these days.
No, now you're seeing, if you see a 5 or a 7 share, you're doing great. And that's basically
and I think part of it, and a lot of this is the fault of the broadcasters. I remember when I was at CNN, really early days, CNN, because they were watching the trends. And now we're talking 18 years ago or something like that. And I was working in a group called the Program Development. And our job was to make pilots and stuff like that, top secret pilots for CNN. So what they wanted to do is they saw this trend, even 18 years ago, they saw this trend toward digital, what we call digital now. What we back in the day called web more, And so they had us put together a web-only show. And their thought was, well, people at their desks will watch. And so like at noon, we'll broadcast this show at noon. And then everybody will come and watch it. And the challenge is like the people that listen and watch your show, there's some people with us right now, and thank you for being here, but there's plenty of people, maybe even more people that'll pick it up later. And so they were trying to take the TV model and smash it into web or digital, and it failed. And they spent millions to make that thing work. There was a set that we had all sort of, people writing scripts and everything, and it just didn't get the eyeballs. Because what they needed to do with that iteration of a show, which they learned more many years later, is be able to parcel it out in small pieces. And by doing that, then you get some traction. But it's like, how do you monetize that? And so, no, they still haven't worked it out. But I think there's too much TV. There's too many TV people in TV to work it out. I don't know. We'll see. I'm hoping for the best.
Well, and that web type format was really popular, when the internet was really beginning before streaming, but it never paid for anything. You had these web exclusive shows, but there wasn't enough people that were accessing the web in that way to make it successfse. So it never
that
was
one
successful.
Of the big problems. The other side was too about how one of the successes TBT at TK was I had this amazing talent coach for years, and usually consultants and talent coaches, people like that, especially consultants, you can't stand them because all their job is to make the GM happy. That's all it is. Yep. But I got really, really lucky, and I had this talent coach named Tommy Kramer, and Tommy used to say, "Be the moon, not the sun," and it was the smartest advice he ever gave me. Basically, he says is reflect back what people want. Don't try and tell them what they want, right? And you got people like Apple that can do that, can pull that sort of stuff off, where Steve Jobs was able to convince people you want this, even though they didn't know they wanted it. But that's pretty rare. For the most part, you got to find out what do people want to hear? How do they want to consume it? Pay attention to that. If you can work those pieces out, then you got a hit. And that's what we did a lot of times with Atika, you know, Joel and I. We paid attention to what people were into. Are people into wrestling? Yes, they're into wrestling. I know a guy. And so, are people into rock interviews? Are people into, and apparently they were, which was nuts to me, having strippers on the radio. We had strippers on the radio. Yeah, I mean, all that stuff we ended up having. But I also struggled with some of that too. You know, like I don't know if you remember this TBT, but we had a woman named Randy. I think it was Randy Rhodes.
Yeah.
And Randy Rhodes was known for being extremely well endowed. But the thing is, this is radio, so the quote unquote appeal that this person has, you can't see on the radio. And so my head thought, like, well, what can we do? Yeah, exactly. You bring these people in, but it's like, I mean, you can have them tell stories and that, but that can get kind of lewd after a while. You got to worry about your broadcast license. And so my thought was, when we brought in Randy Rhodes, and I don't know if you remember this, but I wanted to portray just how gifted this individual was. So what I did was I took a microphone and put it on the floor. I took a big empty turkey pan, and then I had the lovely Miss Rhodes press her gifts into a bucket of water, so the water would gush out and land into the turkey pan. And so you could just listen to that cascade waterfall as it smashed into the turkey pan with a microphone underneath it. Just because my thought was, how do I portray this rather than going, boy, they're big, you know? And so
the power of
I
displacement.
that was good listening, but exactly. There's a little science in there. Why not? But to me, doing things just a little bit different, having fun with it, and trying not to take yourself too seriously, that was the best way to do it. It still is, I think.
Well, and that leads to one of at least my favorite bits that was done, and that was the hot dog in the car. Yeah. I know there was some death threats and whatnot that resulted out of that.
Yeah, I did. I did that a couple of times, and when I did that in Southern California, and there's a reason behind it, because we killed a dog. Wait. We killed a dog, but there's a reason behind we did that particular thing. So the idea was, it's really hot this summer, and you don't leave your dog in the car, don't leave the kids in the car because it's dangerous, and people aren't getting the message. Take a look every day. Some kid, somebody runs into to the five and dime. Somebody runs into the five and dime, and they put their kid in the back of the car, the dog in the back of the car, come out 50 minutes later, and the kids are pouring with sweat, or they got heat exhaustion. Or the every summer we have that story about the crowd that gathers around the car at the Walmart, and they bash open a window to pull a kid or a dog out or something. We hear all this all the time. So we thought we would do a public service. And so we went down to the pound and we grabbed a dog that was already going to be euthanized. But, it's senseless because they're already going to be killed. And so we thought, let's make this sad, tragic death, let's actually make an example of it. So we put the dog in the car with the microphone, and we want to see how long it would take for the dog to die in the back of a hot car. And so we would take that mic and we'd just go for it from time to time. And you hear the dog at the beginning going, just happy dog, and then come back maybe 10, 15 minutes later, just not quite as much. And then by the end of the hour and a half or so, it was like, and we did this. But if you paid attention, if you really listened, especially the tone of what we were doing, obviously we weren't doing that. Of course, we would never do that. But I tell you what, man, word got around. We had, when I did it in Southern California, no joke, we had a group of folks in a car that said, we're driving by your radio station right now. If you don't stop this, you don't get that dog out of that car, we're going to blow your car up. I swear to you.
With the one with the dog in it?
We will.
The dog in it?
No, exactly right. Yeah, don't hit the dog. We're gonna firebomb your car. In fact, my buddy at the time, it was Justice back then. He drove this silver Beetle, and they even said, like, yours is a silver Beetle, isn't it? And I said, no, that's his. Yeah, that's his. Don't hit my car. I drove a motorcycle. He said, no, yeah, if you hit any car, hit his. And he was freaking out. But then by the end of it, it was funny because I remember, especially in SoCal, by the end of it, we actually, because people freaked out. I mean, they were calling the police. We had everything going on. And by the end of it, we revealed, no, here it is. Look, and we played the original sound clip of the dog being, look, he's back. Look, Sparky's back. It's fine. He's right there. You know, it doesn't really exist. And it had just been my intern when we just recorded the intern's dog. That's all that was. But it's funny, begrudgingly, the ASPCA called us up and said, listen, I don't necessarily agree on the air. I don't agree with your methods, but you certainly got the message out.
Right.
So they were on the fence about it, because that day, all across SoCal, that's all people were talking about. The guys that killed a dog in a car, and their message got out. You know, we ended up getting covered in Los Angeles news for it and all that.
Right. It surely didn't hurt the station's profile. I'm sure.
Because in the beginning, RGM was not happy, and I'm pretty sure that Jeannie back over the TK, because we did that in Pensacola too, right?
Yes.
I just did that as well. But I'm sure Jeannie, because GMs, all they care about is sales, right? That's all they care about, and jocks for the most part are a pain in their butt, and if they just behave and they don't swear on the air, then they're happy. And so that kind of noise, they ain't happy about. And so in the beginning, I think the GM was talking to my program director and saying, like, you got to stop that. You got to get them off the air. They can't do that stuff anymore. And then by the end of it, here come the television cameras sitting down. They interview us. They go interview the GM. The GM's like, wow, we got to spread the message about the dangers of the community. It's like, you trying to take us off the air. Yeah, I mean, I've always been, fostered this idea of, speak to people what matters. No, you were fostering the idea about kicking us off the air is what you were fostering your ideas about. So he was happy to take any small credit of the praise. But, man, like anybody else, he was ready to yank us away. But but the cops were great once we told them what was going on when they came to the door. I've been really lucky with cops my entire career when it came to radio. In fact, we were talking right before the show. I remember being in Pensacola, and I'm glad I don't remember the guy's name, but there was just a cop down there in Pensacola up on the wharf or whatever. I was doing some gig, come out here, win a free T-shirt and all that sort of stuff with your van. And I just said to the cop, because, it was just my personality, hey, can I try your gun? And he handed it to me, which, I mean, he would have been fired. I mean, that's insane. I held the gun. I never thought in a million years to give it to me. And I was the rock jock, so I got to be cool about it. Yeah, go ahead. And the whole time I'm going like, I'm going to shoot somebody. I'm going to drop it. It's going to go off, and someone's going to hit in the head. I was like, it's all I could do to just go, throw it back at him, which would have been a bad idea. I don't understand, gun safety, but I think throwing a gun at somebody is a bad idea. But no, I ended up trying to casually get it back without looking like I was trying to get it out of my hands as quick as possible.
Yeah, and if nobody's figured it out yet, Dick and I have known each other for quite a long time. It was his marvelous idea to bring a guy like me in and give me, I guess, what I would call my first break into figuring out this whole radio thing. I was in the military at the time. And as you guys know, with me and Ace's background, we both went to school, albeit part-time, to do the radio thing. And I jumped at it, and Dick and I have been friends ever since, which is, well over 20 years now.
Yeah, it's got to be close to 25. TK would have been 1999, 2000.
Yeah.
So it's been a while, man. It's been a long while. Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing a lot of people think, I can talk, and I should go on the radio, and it's not like that at all. It's got to be, to some extent, it's got to be this idea of understanding if you're talking with people. It's a little more difficult in this scenario, because I know there's been a couple of occasions when I'm speaking that I think, Ace, you try to say something, but I'm getting cut off. So sometimes it's a little bit difficult with Zoom, but especially on the radio when you're sort of one-on-one, and especially you can stare somebody in the eye, you just have to learn the give and take. And I learned a lot of that about that at TK. Because I had come from solo shows. I did a solo show that got surprisingly popular when I was in Orlando. I did a night show. And part of it is because all the bosses were sleeping. I had a show that went from 8 to midnight. And they were either sleeping or not paying attention. They didn't care about me anymore. I did anything I want. I mean, I did a night show that you just don't do. I had psychics on. I had ex-military guys telling the greatest stories of all time. He didn't find it so great. He was telling about when he got a vasectomy in the Army and how that didn't go so well. It was an amazing story. But I would have it. Nobody does interviews at night on a music station, and I had a great time with it. So then when I went to TK, I had to partner up. It was one of the toughest things. I had to learn that it was okay for the other guy to be funny. And Joel Sampson's a very funny guy. And so it took a while for me to be able to let him just be funny. and rather than me trying to tag it and trying to one-up them. And it wasn't malevolent. It was just that was the nature, because I'd done stand-up comedy for a good couple of years, and this idea of sort of like bantering and tagging of that. But if I say something ends up being a setup, and he ends up getting a line, good, great, get out of it and go. It's tough to learn that.
Yeah, that was also one of my first, most intimidating moments. Was my first time in studio. It's like you just said. You get in there, you think all you got to do is talk, but when that light's on and it's like, boom, it's your turn. It's like, what do I say? And you just kind of get into that. And it's like, okay, you got to try to feed off that other person and be like, oh, okay, get that comfort level going, and you'll be good to go.
And I've coached a number of folks over the years, talent over the years, and as much as you can, you try and develop like a listener part of your brain. So like 95% of what you're doing right now should be just you talking with these other folks and telling the stories, whatever it might be, moving things along. But 5% of your brain needs to be sitting on your shoulder just listening. Because you should always have in your head that's how somebody is hearing something. So, when I say something or when I'm pointing to the camera, I also have to realize that as I point to the camera, someone's not going to hear that. And so I have to make sure I'm paying attention to that I'm explaining what I'm doing. Just little things as best you can. You got to be paying attention to how you present yourself, because some part of you has to be a listener as well, because you're your first listener, because whatever you're about to say, you heard first before it came out of your head. It's a little about writing, to be honest. It's the same sort of thing. When I write stuff that I like. And I'm not one of those authors, because Ace, you and I were talking a little about writing before this. I'm not one of those authors that writes something to market, or I don't, and maybe I should do this more. I don't construct things in a way that puts everything in this perfect bow and plan all this out and plan all that out. I really don't. I'm what's called a pantser, and I write stuff that I just like. And I'm a big believer in the subconscious. And it's amazing to me where sometimes I'll write something and I'll go like, I don't even know what that means. I don't know why that person did that particular thing. Right. In fact, I have a series the LXXXVII series, which I'm wrapping up this year. It'll be 9 books in that series. And there was something, if you ever read that book series, if you're a listener, ever read it, or if you want to read it, fine, I'm happy with that. But in the beginning of that series, there's this moment where the main character, Raz, goes down to Mexico, and he turns the radio on, and he hears a number station. An old number station from like World War II. You remember those? Where it was somebody reading numbers, and it was like 17, 11, 25, 3. And what that was is those are broadcasts back from World War II when that was coded messages being sent over the borders. And so there would be somebody on the receiving end that could go through their code book, and they could kind of take a look and see, oh, this is what the directives are, right? And so I wanted to include that. For some reason, my subconscious said, yeah, go put that in there. And it's like, but what does it mean? I don't know. It wasn't until book 4 that I even knew what that was about. And it was crazy because in the end, as your subconscious works these bits and pieces out, and this is, I guess, part of what I'm saying is sort of trusting in your gut and trusting in when your mind or your sort of instinct says, I should be doing this one thing. I trusted it. And for a while, it was like, I got to work that out. And I was just like, no, I don't. It'll tell me. And I now know what it is, and it's key to the end of the book. And I don't know how far ago that my subconscious worked all that out. I picture him looking like an old newsman from the 50s with his hat on, a cigarette sticking out, with a little thing sticking up over his head, just drinking whiskey at his desk, just beavering away while I'm like, la, 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 la. I'm just tapping my funny little stories. But he's sort of in my brain, or she, who knows? My subconscious could be female, working all those bits and pieces out for me, just kind of, and delivering those up into my brain every now and then. And when those pieces come, I'm just as shocked as anybody else sometimes. It's pretty neat. So I become a little bit like the radio thing I was saying. You're your first listener. I'm the first reader. And so I write things that I would enjoy to read. And that's sort of been my driving force in any of the media I created. You got to pay attention to what people want to hear. Excuse me, and all the stuff like TK, it was stuff that I had a lot of fun with. I made it my own, in some way, something I want to hear. But I do the same thing with the writing. I write stories that I really like, and hopefully people like them too, and so far it seems they do.
Right, and I know what you're talking about to a point, because I will wrestle something when I'm writing. I'm wrestling with it in my head because I want it to mean something or be presented a certain way, and it may be days. And I bore my wife with this stuff, but I'll just blurt it out. I'm like, I know what it is now. And it's such a relief. And then you're so excited to put it on paper or type it because you finally know what the heck you're putting down and why it's there.
And there's a lot of times I'll just push right through, and I might have not worked all this out in the first draft, because the first draft of anything sucks. It's just awful. And once you get that in your head a bit, that it's okay for the first draft to be terrible. In fact, first drafts are always kind of terrible. Once that you're okay with that, it helps you push on and write the book. And so I'll go back, like I had something in this latest book where I had one element, and I really didn't like it. I didn't like this because it felt like it was a placeholder, and I was like, it probably is. And I kept writing, and by about 2/3 way through the book, I was like, oh, it's not that, it's this. So it's an easy fix all the way through, because once I actually inserted that thing back into there and replaced this piece, all the other pieces kind of fell into place. And so, like I said, same thing. I sort of felt that my subconscious knew all along, that little that little person in the 1950s newsroom, smoking a cigarette, drinking his whiskey at the desk, had worked sort of all these bits and pieces out, and then just sort of delivered that sort of little epiphany to me that I could put in later on. And part of it is just when you're writing, and I don't know how far along you are in your book, getting that first draft when just writing the end is just such a relief, and now you can go back and edit. And for a long time, I felt that editing was just like, I got to edit now. But that's where a lot of that creativity comes in. Because now I've got a space. I've created this big lump of clay. And now I get to pull pieces out and put pieces in and shape this piece. And that lump of clay could turn into something that's, something people might like.
Right. And you mentioned Hell Incorporated or Hell Inc. And I love the premise of that. I love the premise of that, where Raz is trying to save his wife, right? That's the premise, and he makes a deal with the devil, basically. And he
goes down in the Hell Inc. series. He goes down because his wife is dying, and she's young, and he's young, and she's been told basically, make your arrangements, say goodbye, and he's an old radio guy. And so always sort of like they ask for forgiveness, not permission. And he goes like, there's got to be some way. They're like, no, there is literally, we've tried everything. There is no way. So he comes up with the idea of going down to the crossroads and making a deal with the devil. And so he makes a deal with the devil, and the devil says to him, okay, fine. To cure her, you need this magic lamp. But the pieces are scattered all over the globe. Go find these 4 pieces, put it together, and this will cure her. And then just, when you're done, give me the lamp. And of course, it's always devil's in the details. The devil wants this lamp for himself. He just can't go get it. He's got to get a human to get it. And so basically, that's what a major part of the book is. And then he ends up getting some partners along the way, and I have a lot of fun with sort of the corporate structure. I play around with that because I had worked at CNN for a while at the time. In fact, I believe I started writing that book under a pseudonym initially because a lot of the meetings I had been at CNN were sort of reflected into this one part of the book. But yeah, you use everything you can at it, And then this latest series, which for those on watching on Facebook Live, whatever, the new series Kane, that one actually. And I what's difficult about Hell Inc., and it's a fun story, and it's all over the place, and it is fun, but it's hard to really describe the story. I got lucky with Kane. I can describe the story very simply, and that all came from actually interviewing for another book, because there's this news adage, and the adage is, dog bites man, that's not a story, but man bites dog, that's a story. And that's a news maxim that's been around for years and years and years. Basically, when a dog bites a person, that happens every day, not a big deal. But a dude biting a dog, that's a story because it's unusual. And so that's what a news story, that's kind of how you define it. And so I was interviewing a bunch of journalists for something else, and that phrase kept on coming up and up. And so for some reason, we're talking about the subconscious, it got stuck in my subconscious and it swirled around. I thought, well, what if that was a story? What if Man Bites Dog was a story? And it turned into Man Bites Wolf. And I just switched it a bit. So basically the story is this super soldier, infected soldier, bites a wolf. The next day, the wolf turns into a French Canadian, 6'5" French Canadian, as you do. And then, so the story is about him trying to find the secret to turn himself back into a wolf, because he, there was a time when he was a wolf, he could just run around the Canadian wilderness naked, and it was a perfect life. You can't really do that as a human. I mean, you can, but you probably get fined and probably frostbite on various parts of your body you don't want. Right. So that's what the story is. And then from there I grew it. I thought, well, okay, so if he is a wolf that's been bitten by a man that turns into a human, obviously in the full moon he's going to turn into a werewolf, right? of course. I mean, that's the natural progression. But then the selfish part of my brain went, I don't want to wait 28 and a half days to be able to have, I want some, as a selfish writer, I want to have fun with it. And I asked around, I Googled a bit, I didn't see this anywhere, because I thought, like, why is it just the full moon that they turn into a werewolf? Why?
Right.
Why not let it? So what if it was a half moon? Maybe he'd be a half werewolf. And then I thought, well, what's a half wolf? Well, that's a dog. So in a full moon, he turns into a werewolf, but in lesser phases of the moon, he turns into a dog when he gets hit by the moonlight. So if it's like, if it's, let's say, a 3/4 moon, he might turn into a Rottweiler. If it's a half moon, he might turn into a pug. The pug's very popular. But if it's, a little sliver of a moon, he might turn into this little yippy little lapdog. And then so as he's pursuing with his partner Imelda through the story, because one thing Kane can't do, the main character Kane, is he's worked out how to speak English and French. He worked out bits and pieces. He's been a human for a whole year as he's searching around to find the secret. But he can't read. That's just beyond what's left of his wolf brain, and he can't drive. He's a terrible driver. When he does drive, he smashes into things. And so Imelda used to be a getaway driver in her former life, and so she becomes his driver, and then becomes invested in his story. And so they're just going. And so the series, I'm writing the 5th one right now, the final one right now. The 4th one comes out here in about a month. And basically, the series is about him trying to find these secrets, about them finding the secret to finding the secret to turn him back into a wolf again. And then sort of all of the challenges along the way, because he wasn't the only person that got infected by this virus. And so there's some monsters out there they got to tackle. But it's not really a monster book, I'll be honest. I don't read a lot of monster books. It's just a fun book about these two characters. And you mentioned Hell Inc. It's a little bit, there's a similarity. My wife picked up on this. For as much as we write things and we try to have themes and stuff like this, you don't write to a theme. They sort of happen, come out of your psyche. So Hell Inc. is basically about these 4 misfits, that come together, the actor, Uncle Jerry, and Raz. And they're all people that just don't quite fit really well into the world. They're just a little bit all square peggy, whatever. But when they come together, they could be something amazing. And that's the same sort of idea here, I mean, Kane is this former wolf who's now a human that doesn't quite understand the world and is a bit of a bumbling dude for a big, huge guy. And then Imelda is this former criminal with a bit of a dark sort of childhood growing up. And so they both didn't quite fit into the world just right, but when they come together, they are a force to be reckoned with. And so maybe that's a hopeful tone, but I like my fiction to be kind of hopeful.
What keeps those creative juices flowing to keep writing, a 9-book series or a 5-book series or whatever?
I think it's 2 things, and then I want to find out from you, Ace, what you're about to ask, but I think it's 2 things. I won't get too much in depth because we can talk about the narcolepsy in a bit. 1 is anxiety, and 2 is narcolepsy. And I'll be honest, the narcolepsy helps with with the creativity, I feel, and I believe that these days. The anxiety from me not writing is crippling. And it took me a while to understand that. And so while writing is anxiety filled, when I don't write, I get depressed. And it's one of those things that, I've got to do it. I've got to get these things out of my head and poison other people with them. Because if I don't, they get stuck and roll around all by myself. So really what compels me to do it is this, I know that I feel better. And I really love telling stories, of course, all of those things. But if I want to break it down to some of the more serious parts, it's anxiety. It's anxiety of not writing, and that panic I get when I don't write. I've got to do it. I don't know if you feel the same way, Ace.
Well, not necessarily anxiety, but if I'm down or in a mood, I will always bring myself up by writing, because I am creating a whole different world where things don't suck as bad as they do in your perceived real life, and it always it lifts my mood. I write a chapter, I feel better.
Yep. And it's funny too when you publish it, and we're talking a lot about mechanics here, and sometimes you forget the most important part of this, the reader, and I could never have even prayed for this sort of thing, but the response I've gotten from readers has been, humbling sounds like such an a-hole thing to say, but it just touches me. There was a woman who wrote to me here just late last year, and the first 2 books, the 3rd book was about to come out, And she just said that she loved the books and she just said thank you. She said her father was really ill at the time, and things weren't going so well at work. And she said, I knew it didn't matter how bad things were during the day. I came home, and my 2 friends were waiting for me. I know that Imelda and Kane were there, and I know you were going to make it okay for them. And and there's a lot of humor in the book, and there are a lot of fun sort of moments, and they get into every mischief and trouble, and they always sort of work it out as they go. But that is just one of the most beautiful things anybody's ever said to me, that they actually found solace, that they found a bit of an island of joy in something I'd written. And if I die tomorrow, hope I don't die tomorrow. It's actually 2 days ago for you. If I die tomorrow, that will be one of the sweetest things anybody has ever said to me. One of the great joys of my life to know that. And she's somebody who voiced it, and there might be other people. And I thought about all the stuff I'd been reading over the years, and those moments that I would find that as an escape. And if people read these books, because they're fun books, I hope so. I hope they're fun. But if people see them as a bit of an escape from, as you say, how screwed up the world can feel sometimes, that's great. That's an amazing compliment that I love.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's an escape, and it's not only an escape for the reader, but like for the writer as well. You know, you're escaping, you're writing.
Your mic. I can't hear you.
You're creating, you're writing, you're escaping. It's an escape for the writer as well. And that's kind of what I'm talking about with not so much the anxiety, but I'm getting down. I've not written anything in a week. I need to do something, and I got all this stuff in my head, and I got to get it out, But yeah, that's
which
a great
goes exactly back to what we were saying. Yeah, what we were saying a moment ago is because that is the same. I agree with you. That's the same thing for me. I use it as an escape. I create this world to get away from this one a bit. And then you realize, and it's a little bit like, like we're talking about the listeners, that you're your first listener. I'm the first reader. So as the first reader, I find it to be an escape to be in this world and play around this world. And for all the stuff that I try, when people say, okay, there's amazing this moment you said, or this joke you said, or this line you said, it's like, you know what? Those get handed over to me. I had I had one, and I won't do it any justice, but I had one just the other day. It's in the new book where they go into this shop. And you got to remember, Kane, he's French Canadian, but he also used to be a wolf, and so there's a lot of words and phrases and things he doesn't know. And so the shop was talking about something. He said, "Get that thing out of here. That's bad juju." And they go walking outside, and all this was just what would Kane say to that? So Kane goes, "What is juju?" And so Imelda says, I don't know, 2/3 of a law firm. And that, and that's not a bad joke. That's not a bad joke. But the idea that somebody would go, that's a great joke you wrote. I didn't write it. And I know this is going to sound flaky to somebody, but that just was gifted down to me. And I'm not saying from a higher power or anything, I don't know where it comes from. But it was just the first thing. Once you know your characters, Imelda's a bit snarky. She's a little bit like my character on TK, to be honest. A little bit snarky in a way. A little bit of, sometimes a bit of a jerk. And so that's the first thing came out of her mouth. So I didn't construct it. That just was gift wrapped to me. And there are hundreds, if not thousands of moments as I write that happens. And so I enjoy the writing process because I'm sort of reading it at the same time.
Yeah, and I like the idea you just mentioned earlier about he changes in different moonlights to different types of or breeds of dogs or something like that. That expands the humor that you're putting into that book because you're infusing these books with humorous tones. And I think I read somewhere Douglas Adams. You'd liked those books growing up.
Yeah.
Carl Hyacin. Is it Carl Hyacin that does it for the Florida books? He's noted for his humor. Sometimes you're like, I don't want to read something funny, but when you read it, you're like, man, this is a great book. It's got adventure, it's got humor, and it all wraps up nice in the end.
But if you start to understand your characters a bit, or you being true to your characters, because when I say stuff like I'm a pantser and that, I don't ignore craft. I do pay attention to craft. It's just like radio. Radio's the same way. It may sound like when you're on the air that you just sort of blah, blah, but there's craft to everything, right? And a perfect example of what you're saying is as I'm writing and he turns into, let's say, a pug, or he turns into a poodle or something, there is some part of my brain that goes like, what effect would that have? So let's say he turns into a Chihuahua or something. That's an easy one. So he turns into a Chihuahua. Chihuahua is known to be a little bit and a little bit mean or whatever. A golden retriever is compassionate. So a part of his character development as he turns into the dogs and goes, he actually carries a little bit of that with him. And so that's part of his character development. And I don't give anything away, but he's got to do, you know, they're fighting monsters on occasion and stuff like that. So he's got to do some stuff that's pretty intense. And there's a moment after he's one or two of these dogs that he develops a little bit more compassion or maybe a little more empathy. And so that thing that he used to do easily, like as a wolf, he needs to kill prey, easy. I need to kill it, good, eat it. But now he's been these various dogs. And it sounds like I constructed this, but this is really something that really sort of generated from the character. I knew it needed something, but he's affected by these moments that happen through the story. He's affected by turning into these animals, and it changes, or not changes as much as it evolves his personality and the way he sees the world. And so the Cain that we see in book 5 won't necessarily be exactly the same we saw in book 1. And to be honest, you never want that anyhow. In fact, if I want to talk about theme, and I hope I'm not laying too much onto this, and I will say that one of my readers was pointing this out, one of my beta readers, because they just got through book 4, is that Imelda comes in as pretty insecure, and Cain's actually an egomaniac in a way, because he was a wolf. He's a 6'7", gorgeous French-Canadian guy. So he was an egomaniac, and she was really insecure. And to some extent, as the book progresses, she gets more confident and more brutal and more aggressive. She's actually herself moving towards becoming more animal. And then ironically, Cain's actually embracing more of his humanity. And that's actually something I didn't necessarily think I was doing, but one of my readers said, there's almost like switching places. And it's like, I hope I get credit for that because that's really neat. But that's exactly true. She actually, to such an extent where at some point, like in book 5, she's got to reevaluate herself because maybe she's gone too far. And then maybe for him too. So yeah, it's neat. It's fun to watch these characters grow, almost like your kids. I've been writing this series. When I get through book 5, it will take me 12 months basically to finish the series. And it's like raising an 18-year-old kid or something like that and watch them grow. It's going to be sad to see them go, but it's really neat to see other people enjoy them.
Right, and you're doing this full time now, right?
Yeah, the best way to become a full-time writer is get fired. And so the television show I was working on, they canceled the show. And so I've been out of work for the last couple of months, so I'm full-time writing. It's going really well. But, also it's the sort of thing that the money that I'm making, and I'm not, a millionaire by far, but the money I'm making with the books, it'd be great to be able to chuck that into retirement. So I do want to take a look at maybe doing some sort of side gig or something to get, if I don't get too backstory on you, but that'd be great. I mean, if I end up doing more of the writing full-time, great. But when I wrote at least 2 of these books, if not 3 of them, I was working 60 hours a week. And the only way to be able to do 60 hours a week is to steal it from somewhere. And that's where the anxiety came in. And so I was getting up at 3:30 in the morning every day and writing for 2.5 hours each morning. And that's how I wrote 2 books last year, is doing it every morning for a couple of hours. And that's exhausting. But one advantage I have is I'm always exhausted. 100% of the time I'm exhausted. Or sleepy is the way to say it. I have narcolepsy, like I mentioned earlier. But that was something for many years. I saw narcolepsy as like, why do I have to have this? People have obviously much worse things than that. But if you've somebody once described, because I don't know what it's like for anybody else. I only know what it's like for me. But narcolepsy, somebody said, for an average person, what does narcolepsy feel like? And these are their words, not mine. But they said, well, stay up for 30 hours, now go to work. Now, when you come home, make dinner, and then when you're done with dinner, sit down with your spouse and talk about your day. That's what narcolepsy feels like. And so I don't know, but I do know that anytime you leave me like speaking with you, I got to focus on what I'm talking about. I got to remember that I'm sitting here because my mind will drift. And so that might sound a bit negative, but the positive side of it, and as I've said before, I feel narcolepsy is a superpower when it comes to my writing. And the example I like to give is like, do you know when you're lying down going to sleep at night? You're sitting there and your mind's kind of just sort of like going into a bit of a haze. You're sort of in that wake and sleep state. And you come up with a bit of an idea. You go, that's a really good idea. I should write that. That's amazing. I should write that down. And then you wake up the next morning and you can't remember. And you didn't write it down.
Right.
That state, that dream sort of like state, I'm in that 85% of my day. And I do believe a lot of my creativity comes from that. And some of the stories that I write, or maybe if nothing else, that sort of dream state allows my brain to play and dance around a bit. And so I think that a good amount of the creativity I have stems from being in this dream state. It's a challenge sometimes, I'll be honest. And I take a couple of drugs to try and counter it. But for the most part, you just get used to being tired. And so last year when I knew that television was going away and I said, I need to get onto this writing thing, I just said, what's being extremely tired and being just a little more extremely tired? So I got up every day at 3:30 and wrote a couple books.
Yeah, my oldest brother writes as well, and that was what he did. He had no time. So he was up at 4 a.m. every morning, 4 a.m., pumping out 2 hours worth of work and then going to work.
Yep.
And he did that
and no shade to people, because there's plenty of people that are probably listening to this or watching this thinking like, well, I guess I suck. No. You do it on whatever schedule you got. And I want to be clear. I got up at 3:30 because I woke up at 3:30. I mean, sometimes there was an alarm, but many times I woke up and that anxiety was there because I was like, I got to get this done. I got to do this thing. So I was powered by that. So it was almost like borderline mental illness that got me up at 3:30. So if you're not somebody who feels as though you can write before work, that's fine. Just write on the weekends. Just write anything. If you really, here's my advice for you. If you really want to write a book, if this is something you've been dying to do, just do it. And I know that sounds simple, but it's just do it every day. It could be you spend an hour, but it could be you spend 5 minutes. It could be literally that you spend 60 seconds writing 1 or 2 lines and that's it. Because it was something when I had my stand-up days many years ago. It was this great advice. I think it was Jerry Seinfeld. Never said it to me, but it was a known thing. Jerry Seinfeld said, being a comic is like being inside a railroad tunnel. And every time you get up on stage, you just move 1 railroad tie forward. Every time you get on stage, you move 1 railroad tie forward. The little piece of wood in between the 2 tracks. And eventually, you're out in the sunlight. And that's the way he saw it. Every time getting on stage, you get a little bit closer to making it. And writing is the same way. And it does something for your head. Like, even if I write literally, and I've done this, 1 sentence. If I write 1 sentence, I can feel like I'm actually a little farther along than I was yesterday. And I tell you what, that'll do a little bit for your brain. That does a little bit for your mental health, and you feel like you're doing something. It doesn't need to be a ton. And you might even delete that sentence in your edit. But a lot of it's about keeping your head in a good place. And if you feel that anxiety, you feel that you need to write, just write 1 sentence. And sometimes I've planned on writing 1 sentence, and I end up writing 10 pages. You never know.
Right. And you must be like a glutton for punishment or something, because you're doing extremely difficult careers. Stand-up comedy is not easy. Not easy at all. Having your own morning radio show, especially in a big market, is not easy. You're fighting for ratings. You're fighting for audience. CNN producer cannot be easy. You've got a corporate structure you've got to work with. And now you're writing.
One part of that is always been writing all along. I mean, what got me on stage, for the most part, it was never. I loved stand-up when I was a kid. I was one of those kids in high school that had the black T-shirts with the sleeves ripped off with Van Halen and Metallica. That was me.
It's what we wear now.
But on my tape player, man, I had all the little comedy greats. I mean, I listened to all the music too, but I loved comedy. I memorized entire comedy albums. I just really loved, and again, it came down to that structure and all that. I loved the voodoo of comedy, how just the word placement, moving the word from the middle to the end makes the joke, and then how you could eventually learn some of those sort of patterns and that sort of thing. And so I had sent out to various places. I've written some short stories, and this was 18 or 19. I sent out some stories to various magazines, and this is back when, this is pre-internet, so you had to send them what was called an SASE, a self-addressed stamped envelope. And so what that was is, you sent it out to Amazing Stories, you had to also include within what you send an envelope addressed to you from them with a stamp, which meant that when you send it out and the rejection came back, you paid for the stamp. That
Yep.
that's you're paying for your own rejection. But and everything took, it wasn't days like it is or weeks today. It was months to be able to hear something back, and that was too long. And I didn't want to do that. So I had this harebrained idea. If I write something and get on stage, arguably I'm published that night. And I know that sounds like nuts logic, but in my head that made sense. And that's what got me into doing stand-up comedy. Because I could write stuff, jokes, or scenarios, or stories I might tell on stage. And the moment you get up on stage and tell them, now you're kind of published because you've got an audience. And that got me there. And from there, I got into the radio thing just because of the storytelling I love so much. But the advantage, or I don't know if you call it an advantage, of all the sort of roles I've taken, they've all been in fields that are hanging on the knife edge. Stand-up comedy in the mid '90s was difficult because just as I was coming up and starting to do well up in Minneapolis, that's when all the networks around A&E and the Food Channel, even back in the day, whatever it was, they were all putting stand-up comedy on because they realized that it was cheap programming because all you got to do is put a person, a microphone, and a brick wall, and that's it. That's it. No script writing or anything. Let's put that on. It's cheap programming. And so everybody had stand-up shows. And this started to affect the flow into the club. And so then I moved myself into radio. And when I got into radio, I did that for a couple of years, but I started to see radio change. When I got to Atlanta at that point, there was all this voice tracking coming in. All these people, and you see it all over the place now. Where I can say there's a guy down in Dallas doing your night show in Atlanta, but he's also doing the midday show. And yeah, the company is saving money, but it also waters down and lessens the product, which means fewer and fewer people can be paying attention, which means that there's going to be fewer and fewer jobs after all. So I bounced my way into television. And so now in television is kind of going away. So I seem to hop into something, but as I hop and go, there's a shelf life there. And I've been doing television now for 20 years or so, and now TV news is in a weird place. And so who knows? I don't know what the next venture might be, but it's going through a difficult time. But yeah, I guess I like sort of living on the knife edge a little bit. It keeps, it can be stressful, but I'm full of stress. And I put it into my writing.
When I got into radio in the late 80s in college, of course, we had the cart. We still had turntables, and it's all live. And I left that, never really did much with it. Just a couple of years ago, the wife and I are buying a mattress in a town just south of here. And we meet the guy at a store. It's a meeting place. You buy the mattress. He turns out that we had to use the bathroom. He says, go down this next door to the radio station. I own the radio station. And you can use the bathroom. It's on a weekend. He gives us the key or whatever. I hadn't been in a radio station since 1991. So I'm curious to see how this is working, right? He's got 2 radio stations in that one building. Walk in, there is a board here and a board there, and no one's there. No one's there. It's all satellite. And that's cool.
Well, and
but you lose personality, I think.
Right. There were elements of that. Like when I worked at KESM in El Dorado Springs, I was the morning guy, rooster. But all the time, people would come up to me. I'd do like these. I used to do remote broadcasts. I get $15 an hour. 15. When I got to Atlanta, major market, I was getting $500 an hour to a remote broadcast. So there's a big disparity between tiny market and major market. But I remember going to like in El Dorado in Missouri. I don't know if we have them. I don't remember if we had them down in Florida. But Sonics, was that a thing in Florida?
Yeah.
Sonics.
Yeah.
So Sonics. So I remember doing a gig down at the Sonic, and the people come and go like, that afternoon guy, he's got an amazing voice. Who is that guy? And what he was on tape. And this was before voice tracking, and this was before computers and all that. There was a computer there, but this was before. And all it was is Don Cohn, the guy that owned the radio station, he would get these reels in the mail and these big sort of reel-to-reels, and all this dude was just on a reel. And so in between songs, he would cue this one into this one, and the music was on a reel, so he would cue between the two, and he'd do the call letters and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, even back then, we had elements of that. And then when that became easier and easier, you don't have to send tapes through the mail anymore. Then, of course, I mean, it's a natural progression, and it's just how capitalism works. It's our system we got, and it's one of the best citizens we got with all the flaws that it has. And sometimes it chews things out and spits them out. And it does that for a lot of different media.
Yeah, and now we're sitting with millions, and I don't think that's an exaggeration, of podcasts, just people trying to get along with the same thing, whether it be, video or just strictly audio. Everybody seems to have a podcast. And you can find some where they've got 2 or 3 views per show, and then some that have got thousands.
Yeah, but I think podcasts are great. I think podcasts are what radio used to be 20 years ago. This opportunity for people just to kind of find your niche or whatever. I mean, it's obviously a lot more fragmented because that's the nature of it, right? I actually ended up doing a show here, about 2 months ago, and they might have been European, I can't remember, but they wanted to have me on because they read the book or something. But they wanted to have me on, and we ended up, we all had to bring a favorite album of ours and tell us why our favorite songs from the album, and all we did is discuss these albums for like an hour and a half, the whole show. Yeah. And it's like, that's niche, because some of the stuff these guys like, I felt bad coming in with Blizzard of Oz, but some of these guys was like Norwegian death metal is like, yeah, I like track 3 I can't pronounce.
TbT and I could do that for hours. We could do that for hours. Bring in something. We would probably do a podcast about it.
Right. But but that's the thing but they found their audience with their love of music, and I think that's the greatest thing about it. It's a little bit like writing, or a little bit kind of like how radio used to be. You guys have, obviously a great love for each other and what you guys are talking about, and people are attracted to that. They're attracted to, like the musicians you guys have on and the artists you guys have on. They want to hear them, and more specifically, they can hear or they can see those artists all over the place, because those people appear all over the place. But the difference is the two of you. And the two of you are what makes that interview special. And more people gravitate to how you guys respond to that. I've done probably in the last 3 months 100 interviews with podcasters. But this interview with you guys right now is different than any other one I've done before. And that's what I'm saying is that's what you hope for. That's what makes you different than everybody else. And yeah, there might be thousands podcasters, but it's a little bit like stand-up comedy. When I first start doing stand-up, doing those open mics, there were dozens and dozens of people around. Come back another year or two later, not so much. Because a lot of those people came and took a shot and didn't have the passion or the drive or the anxiety to keep doing it. and a lot of the other people faded away. So you keep plugging away at it and find your audience, and you grow and grow. And those people that are splashing around, make a lot of noise, and aren't really putting their hearts into it, they go away eventually. People hear that. People can hear when you care. And if somebody's just doing it because they want to do it, they just go away after a while.
Right.
Yep. We've got our chat that goes along with this, on our YouTube part, and we've constantly got a steady stream of people going and talking about the guests, or they've almost basically become family. So when they're sitting there talking, but to me it reminds me a lot of radio, because you have sometimes the same caller, that calls in on Thursdays at 7:30 on the dot. They're going to call up, right, and they're going to request that REO Speedwagon or whatever it is. It's nice to have that camaraderie, and it's a good feeling, and that's something I know that Ace and I totally enjoy, because this is what we wanted to do 20, 30 years ago. It's just in a different way. And it works out.
And a lot of times people turn into characters. I think you were a caller, weren't you, TBT? I don't remember how we first got you on the show.
I was, and I actually, there was a guy before me that was doing it, and he left, and I think you had said something about, we're looking for somebody, and I think it was done in a joking way, and I said, okay. So I called, and I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. And it was like, holy cow. And then, working at TK, and then out in San Bernardino. And then you go to, I think that's when you left there and went back to Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And I stayed on with, John and Nikki, who continued with that show for probably another, I don't know, maybe another year or so. So it was something that, just kept going, and it gets better and better, the more you do it. We've listened to our first couple of podcasts, and we want to just delete them because they were just horrible. Yeah. But you can't. You got to keep them.
Yeah. No, I mean, if I listen to, like, when I used to listen to the earlier air checks and the way I would speak, And a lot of it was just not me getting used to. That's one thing as any creative. It's a little bit like with the writing thing. You know, I'll write that first draft, a rough draft, and I'll go through and edit. And the version of that with podcasting is you got to air check yourself. You got to go back and listen to what you're doing, and see. And that doesn't mean look I screwed up or all this sort of thing. It's just you got to grow. You want to be better. If not tomorrow, you want to be better next year than you were this year. You know, and that's as long as you're growing, getting better, and you will naturally. But you do have to pay attention. There were a couple of folks in television in particular for some reason, some TV talent that would say, oh, I never watch myself back. It's like, well, why wouldn't you? You're not going to learn. You're not going to notice. In fact, I remember many years ago when I was doing stand-up, when we would record our sets, and there was advice that came from a club owner, and they would say, if you want to pick something up, what you do is watch the set through, that's great, but then watch it again on 10 times speed or something. I was like, why is that? He said, it just picks up any mannerisms you might do repeatedly. And he was right. And because I used to have longer hair, and I would just do this, and it was just a nervous tick, and I would do this. And I sped it up, and I looked like I was punching myself in the head. It was like, yeah, I got to cut that out. That's nuts. It's not screw my hair up.
Yes.
But yeah, no, it's good. You got to listen back to yourself.
Yeah, somewhere around here, there's an old VHS of me doing TV news that no one will ever see. It's right. I can't stand to watch it, but I have watched it, and I think I've watched it with the kids.
Apparently, somewhere at CNN, it might be different now because they've moved out of the hub in Atlanta. But apparently, there's a tape somewhere at CNN. It was a secret for years. There's two of them. One of them is there was news done by puppets. And we asked about it a couple of times. Like, really? He said, because I was in, program development, and so we did pilots. He said, is that true? And so there would be these rumors like they tried doing news with puppets. It's like I really, really, really want like a wolf puppet, like an Anderson Cooper puppet. I mean, and like no. And so we quickly find out. Yeah. And then there was definitely another one. I never heard or saw it, and who knows? It might actually have been put on YouTube by now. But I believe this one. Apparently there was an end of the world thing, where they had some tape or some half-inch tape, whatever they could, or 3/4-inch tape that they could put in that was 2 hours long or something. That if there was a meteor coming, or if there was a nuclear war or something, that everybody could go home. They put in the tape, and this was the last 2 hours that we broadcast on CNN. And apparently that tape. And I heard from a lot of people, yes, that's a real thing. The puppet thing, I couldn't get confirmation, but a good number of people said there was I don't know if it was 1 or 2 hours or 5 hours, but there was a tape that they had that if they all had to it's over now, we need to go home. The reckoning is happening. That go ahead, put the tape in and walk away. So supposedly.
It was handcuffed to Bernard Shaw's, wrist.
Yeah. Bernie Shaw. I actually got a chance to go up at CNN Center. I got a chance to go up into the secret apartment of Ted Turner. Far less impressive than I thought it would be. I mean, it still was kind of neat. The spiral staircase take you up there. But he had a telephone in the bathroom. I think that was the most extravagant thing. But, got onto the balcony and that. I think they did a broadcast or two from out there. But it was kind of a dump. I'll be honest. It wasn't that nice. I was surprised. But,
Yeah.
Poor Ted.
Of little means, didn't need a whole lot, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, Dick, I want to thank you very much for
walking around in the newsroom.
Right?
Yeah. He'd come down. I was told he would come down in his robe, like at 1 a.m. if he couldn't sleep, and he'd walk around through the newsroom in his robe.
Like Hugh Hefner?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Dick, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I know we've kept you long enough. We'll let you go for the evening, but I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. It's great to see you again, talk to you again, get some of these stories. We're looking forward to your fourth book in this series that comes out next month. I think April 23rd is what you've got on the Kane series, Kane Unchained, which will be out April 23rd. If anybody wants to look at any of the socials, I highly advise you check out the socials for Dick. We're going to put those on with the podcast once we get this published. Check out his Amazon page. Go on, read his books. Dick is, of course, on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, all the fun stuff. So be sure to check his stuff out.
I would say, too, if you're an audiobook listener, the first 2 audiobooks of the series are out. The third one comes here in 2 weeks. The folks that Podium have doing the audiobooks take it next level. I love audiobooks, and they're a dream come true.
Yeah,
And
I
those
do want to say before you totally wrap up, I also want to say, because I don't think we say this enough to each other, Travis, you're somebody who's in my world, and you've been in my world for 25 years. And so when I define myself, you're a part of that. And I don't think we necessarily say that to anybody. There's a reason why you and I have kept contact over the years. And we don't talk to each other a lot, not every week, not every month. Hell, there's probably times we can talk every year, for that matter. But you are part of what defines me. And I want you to know how much that means to me to have you as a part of who I am. And I always I cherish that. And I want to make sure you know that. So I'm really glad, brother, that you had me on. It means a lot to me because you mean a lot to me. You too, Ace, not so much. But for the most part, Travis. But no, it was delightful meeting you, Ace. It really was. You're a great dude. But I just want you to know that, Travis, that you mean a lot to me. So I'm really glad that you're still in my world, brother.
I appreciate that very much. For those 25 years, you've basically, we're turning this into a love story, but you've been a mentor for me, because you taught me a lot in even just that short time that we spent together. So that feeling's mutual, brother. I really appreciate it. And once you get some of those other books out, you're going to be back.
We'll do it, man. I always got something else cooking. We'll see what happens.
Sounds good. All right. On behalf of Ace, I am TBT. That was Dick, Mr. Dick Wybrow. This is the Weekly Pour Podcast. We'll see you next week.